Hi, how are you? Good morning. This is the Angry Buddha Vlogcast. I'm your host, W.J. O'Reilly, and we're going to be continuing today in reading a section at random, chapter 21, from The Fiction of Forgiveness, the first installment in the trilogy, Angry Buddha, Making Peace with Paradox. Chapter 21. Tyler couldn't have cared less that his opinion wasn't asked. He gave it anyway. For good or bad, the Montrose School had been an obsession of my life. This is in quotes, by the way. It's kind of a journal entry. For good or bad, the Montrose School had been an obsession of my life. It became a standard for winning and losing. Upon reflection, it was very hard for me to win there, and I found it sometimes hard to feel I'm winning in the world, too. End quote. Quote, success is going from failure to failure with no loss of enthusiasm. Winston Churchill. Certainly wish someone had taught me that lesson early on when all I seemed to do at Montrose was to come up short. I admit I learned how to learn there, and that has been a useful foundation for life, which is really about learning continuously, 24 hours a day. I must temper that. I learned a very narrow version of what it is to learn. IQ-centered learning, verbal and mathematical. Sensitivity, communication, empathy, these were the least important at Montrose. And lives were broken and lost, lost and broken. I will never relent from this, despite the happy talk, the PR, and the propaganda. I want to say a few things to Ernie Brosnahan to get them off my chest. I know the board has loved your tenure as head of school. I think you and your predecessor have taken Montrose in a direction that I wouldn't have supported. In parentheses, not that such opinions would ever have been consulted. Close parens. The school, when I attended, seemed to value its anonymity. Very few people had heard of it. The Andovers and Exeters never had the time of day for Montrose, and why should they? Our school didn't have the National Social Blue Book cachet of the waspy places. Montrose boys were the nerds of the private school world. We wore suits and carried briefcases at 12. We were sports laughingstocks. Why? Because we were engaged in other pursuits, rightly or wrongly. That's who we were. But honestly, I don't care what kind of branding you try to impose on the historic image of Montrose. Put up every $14 million gymnasium proposal on the East Coast. Put up your skewed SAT median scores to prove to the world, despite your worst fears, that you are the statistical best of the best academically. Do it. You apparently need this continual compensatory fist-bumping for some lack or lie. Quote, I want reparations for the abuse of all the gay and non-standard boys who went through your program during my era. When I attended, nobody knew what abuse was, nor were things like ADD or dyslexia diagnosed. But we saw with our own virgin eyes the continual torment of the boys whom the most aggressively stupid would pick on every day of their tortured lives at Montrose. What could be done? There was no recourse. It couldn't even be discussed. Boys who were picked on by the more, quote, popular kids would huddle together in their corner of the classroom, trusting no one from outside their damaged circle of compatriots. Mr. Brosnahan, do you know how many illustrious graduates of my era would never set foot back on Montrose grounds because of the dehumanizing treatment they received at the hands of students who were, quote, and this is in uppercase, who were invited back to speak to the school in later years, all chipper over their success on Wall Street or whatever. And here's the kicker, Wyatt noted. Over the years, Montrose was openly ridiculed by the other private schools for its, quote, gayness. The all-boys status is hard to defend when most other schools went co-ed decades ago. Meanwhile, there was never any acknowledgement of LGBTQ members among staff or leadership. Why? Was it being kept a secret? I, for one, knew of former staff who were homosexual, but kept a necessary low profile in the old days when such admissions were tantamount to reputational suicide. If not reparations, then I want an apology and a public acknowledgement of the abuse that countless generations of boys are subjected to as a result of antiquated and cowardly policies to protect the secrets of this flawed and duplicitous institution. Signed, Wyatt Turner. Yeah, that's chapter 21. So it's in the words of Tyler. A lot of it parallels my own experiences in private schools. It's got a great quote from Winston Churchill. Oh my gosh. I learned a lot, it says, at Montrose about winning and losing. It was very hard for me to win there. And then the quote by Winston Churchill: success is going from failure to failure with no loss of enthusiasm. Oh my God. That is the story of my life. At least at its best. At its best, it is. Okay. And then, really going over this piece, talking about like that I learned how to learn at Montrose, or that Tyler, or Wyatt, both the above, learned to learn. But that was not really true, because the only standard really that was utilized there was IQ. It was like verbal, mathematical, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. But it was all about the IQ and developing those, preparing for the SAT. So, if we're going to talk about Howard Gardner and the multiple intelligences, of which there are now 11 or 12, and maybe there were 2 or so that were really developed or taken very seriously. Just speaking for myself, and as I said, the lines are so blurred in this, it's ridiculous. But, this might as well be an autobiographical. It probably is, but it's all fictionalized, so forget that too. But, I was a musician, and I really had no place in the system that I was educated in. There was no respect for musicianship. I received an award one year, but other than that, what really, the most important piece, of course, was sports, academic success, and that was it. So, then there's this fictionalized open letter to the head of the school, the Montrose Academy, and then there's the mention about the other schools, the elite schools, and how they really didn't, they might have heard of my old school, or of Montrose Academy, but that didn't really mean very much, because there was really no National Social Register Blue Book value to those at the school. And what does that mean? Nothing. It means absolutely nothing. So, what this really reveals more than anything is kind of the lack of subtle moral ownership of one's own experience. A lack of subtle awarenesses in experiencing of one's own life. And also the establishment of values. Just speaking for myself, the values that I put together, based upon my mother's upbringing as a Belgian immigrant whose parents worked in the lace factories of Lawrence, Massachusetts when they came here. My mother, all she knew is that she had to get the hell out of there. And she did. She graduated high school at 15, enrolled in a 3, and I'm proud of this, of course. Of course, pride is one of the 7 deadly sins, right? But she graduated high school at 15, came here with 2 languages, no English whatsoever, and in that 1 year in high school, she became fluent in English as well. Went on to a 5-year program it was a 5-year program at Massachusetts College of Pharmacy. Graduated in 3 years at the age of 18 in a military wartime expedited kind of a program. But the point is this: she had to get out of there, and that's why she put emphasis on getting her name finally in the National Blue Book Social Registry. It meant something to her to climb out of the ghetto, and she did, and good for her. And that was also, a lot of her choices had to do, for her children, had to do with that as well. But then ultimately, we do know, don't we, that our children make their own decisions? I think. Unless it's convenient for them to blame you for not being able to persuade them at a key time. I'm going to say this, and by the way, please forgive me, son, for doing this. But there was a time when, I wanted I really pushed my kids in baseball. My oldest son played. He did really well. He was an MVP in the Babe Ruth League. We hit some bad politics in high school, but he tried out for the Boston Red Sox the day after his 16th birthday and had a good tryout through strikes and really had a good tryout. The younger one showed he showed tremendous talent in the sport. And probably because I wanted him to, or I was getting something, I was getting off on his success, or both my kids, really, both Ben and Julian. But, Julian quit the sport of baseball at 7. And, he might have had a career, you never know. But some years later, he got ticked off at me once, and he blamed me for it. And he says, well, as a parent, shouldn't you know how to persuade your kids how to do things, even when they don't want to do them? And I think about like these, like the ballet world, which I grew up in the presence of, and my sisters, especially the older one, being forced, a very shy girl, being forced to be a ballet dancer, a professional. She became a professional ballet dancer. She was not made for the stage, but she's just a real recluse in so many ways. But there she was, smiling to beat the band up on the stage. It wasn't until her 50th birthday that she was able to actually thank my mother for having done that, because she realized that she got a lot out of it. Her love of music and her general health, which is very, very, very good. So what are we gleaning from this? You know what? Life goes by in a blur. We try to package it. I know I do. We try to package it in ways we can understand it. We blame this for that happening. We say this is the reason why. And the whole psychotherapeutic movement doesn't really help matters either, by saying, yes, if we understand the causes of the problems that we have in our lives, then those problems will disappear. Well, maybe they will. Maybe they'll be lessened by that awareness. But then again, we may then descend into blame, which is going to keep us stuck for another 10 years in those issues. So I'm just saying that, listen, in life, you have nothing but tools. We are robots conditioned to learn 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for 70 to 95 years. This is what we do. This is exactly what we do. And we have so many things at our disposal to help us to decipher it. But you know what they say? The matters of the heart are the most important of all. And being able to empathize with others and to get off it. When you think you're being right and you're pushing your point of view, it's like, cut it out. Let it go. Come on now. It's really about something else when a person starts hammering others to be right and to put them in their place, doesn't it? There we go. The attachment to control. The attachment to control. Being right, making others wrong. This is classic Eckhart Tolle stuff, but at the same time, that's what I'm left with here. So, here at the end of this we're at the end of Sandy Hook on the Jersey Shore in this deserted army base called Fort Hancock. Look it up on this isthmus, or this spit of land that goes out 5 miles into the ocean, overlooking New York City off to my right. Also, right nearby here is the oldest lighthouse in current operation in the United States, from like 1728 or something like that. And then these buildings, I'm going to see if we can get a shot for you here. It's interesting. I thought I'd try this vibe today. They're from the late 1800s, 1900-ish. Those are officers' quarters, and there's hundreds of buildings here that are in various stages of repair. There's actually a federal program for people to lease these buildings for 50 years, renovate them on their own, and pay some kind of a lease fee, amortized based upon the money they put into the renovation. But it's an interesting space. I like to come here and bike. So there you have it. Thank you so much. That's the Angry Buddha for you. Be well. Take care. Bye.